Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Love and Murder, the weekly true crime podcast discussing relationships gone terribly wrong, where our motto is, you're either someone's last love or their first murder. I am your host, Kai, and our show discusses true crime cases told in the form of a story with mystery and suspense. Be sure to subscribe to Love and Murder on whatever platform you're on. Could be Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you are. In today's episode, we're given a sneak peek into our bonus group, our Patreon, where our lovely lambs go to listen to extra episodes we may have, or even when we have our full episodes, they get to listen to the extras of that episode, whether it's the trial, whether it's the interrogation, seeing pictures of the evidence, seeing just different extras from the cases we have. They also get bonus episodes like this one that I'm about to do, but they get bonus cases about serial killers, crazy crime, whatever crime is going on in the world right now. They just get a lot of bonuses in there. So I was actually just going to do this episode as a bonus, but I decided to give everyone a sneak peek into our lovely lamb Patreon. So you can head over to www.patreon.com/loveandmurder. And you can go ahead and join over there if you want. It's only $1 or above, but the best tier that you can get, the best bang for your buck, is $5 or above. This episode is, have you ever met a serial killer? And so I searched the internet for this question and these answers, and I'm going to give you the answers, these interesting answers that I found. But before I begin, I want to ask you, the listeners, have you ever met a serial killer, or do you know anybody who has met a serial killer? If you have, let us know in the comments below, or you can head on over to our fan page, Love and Murder fan page, and let us know over there if you've ever met a serial killer or know a story of someone who has. I would love to hear it. So I'm going to keep the names out of it because I'm not sure if anybody wants me to share their name, as I'm just reading this from the internet. But then again, it is from the internet. So, But morals, I'm going to keep the names out of it. I'm just going to read the responses that I found to the question, have you ever met a serial killer? The first one that I have is, this person says, yes, when I was about 15 in 10th grade. This was before cell phones in 1981. I was standing in the mall parking lot waiting for my mom to pick me up. I had gotten a ride to the mall from an upperclassman and had agreed to meet my mom in the parking lot at 5:20. It was in West Palm Beach, Florida. As I waited, a car pulled up next to me and the driver started talking to me through the passenger window, which he had rolled down. He told me that I should be a model and that he was a photographer and had a studio nearby. He said I can go and do some practice shots. I said I was expecting my mom any minute and could not leave or I'd be in big trouble if I wasn't there when she got there. He said we could be back in 10 minutes with pictures to show her. I said, here comes my mom now. You can ask her yourself. And with that, as my mom drove up, he zoomed off. I don't remember being scared, but I may have been. We didn't report him or anything. It wasn't until I was 49 in 2015 that I stumbled upon a picture of him online reading a story about famous serial killers. Don't ask me why, just randomly searching, I guess. Christopher Wilder, the beauty queen killer, used camera as a prop and you could be a model as his MO. I realized at that moment that I was a serial killer Phil. He targeted me as a victim and I lucked out. Creeps me out to this day. Wow, so I know as a true crime podcaster, I should say that I know this Christopher Wilder. Not know as in, but I've done a case on him or I am aware of this case, but I'm not. So that's probably going to be a future episode in our bonus group, Christopher Wilder as Serial Killer Corner. And wow, how creepy is that, y'all? How creepy. What do y'all think about that one? Another one, looks like this one is from California. This person said, quote, not met, but encountered, and it was absolutely terrifying. My mom and I were driving up the California coast from Los Angeles to Sacramento. The date was September 26, 1969. We wanted to take our time and enjoy a scenic route. Mom had packed a lunch, and we decided to stop at a place called Lake Berryessa. The lake is fairly close to Napa, in between San Francisco and Sacramento. We had our dog with us. We wanted to walk her a bit and find a place to eat lunch. Mom spotted a parking lot and turned into it. The area was desolate and very quiet. There was one car in the parking lot. It was an off-white sedan. My mother noticed that there were clothes on hangers hanging from the little hooks behind the windows in the back seat of the car. She commented on that. Because of the clothing, it looked like someone was traveling. She didn't say anything more, but I sensed that she was a bit weary about being in such a lonely place and seeing one car in the parking lot, but not a soul around. Mom and I began walking our dog on her leash and looking for a spot to sit down and eat lunch. We saw a few picnic tables in the short distance. The lake was to our left as we walked towards the picnic tables, but before we sat down at one of the tables, we wanted to let our dog walk a bit more. So we turned in a somewhat wide circle. The lake and the narrow beach along the lake was now to our right. There were tall brown weeds in front of us, but off to the right. As we were walking along, we heard a voice that came from the tall weeds. The voice, clearly a male voice and somewhat gruff, called, "Hey, psst, psst, hey you, come here." And then he repeated again, "Psst, come here." As I'm writing this and remembering the freeze-frame fear of that moment, I have chills. My mother yelled, "Run!" and grabbed the dog in her arms. We ran back to our Volkswagen Bug, jumped in, locked the door, and got out of there faster than fast. On September 28, 1969, the TV and the newspapers were full of news about a heinous attack at Lake Berryessa. The Zodiac killer had murdered a young woman and severely wounded a young man who had been sitting on the exact beach by the lake my mother and I had passed just before hearing the voice coming from the weeds. My mother heard the news and said, "Yep, it was him." Ooh, that's creepy. What do y'all think about that one? That one was woo. But seriously, who would have gone? If somebody said, "Psst, come here," who would have gone? That's, wow. Anyways, the next one says, I met Green River killer Gary Ridgway in the late 90s, 1999 or so, working in Sausalito. He came in to get a massage. He offered to give me a massage if I'd let him tie my wrist to the table with these sheer red nylon scarves he had with him. Nope. I told him we didn't do things like that. He acted timid and shy and was compliant, so I gave him his massage and he went on his way. I had a bad feeling about him, and despite his timid and weak demeanor, I told a coworker that if that weirdo guy hadn't already killed someone, he was going to. We laughed about it. I remembered what he looked like and his small stature, blue eyes, and weaselly face because the whole incident was just so weird. I wanted to call police on him to track him. I felt so strongly that he was going to kill someone or had killed someone already. But what could I say to them that they could act on? It just bothered me. Ridgway was not caught until 2001, and it was many years later that I would see his photo and realize that he was the man that I gave the massage to, and that I was right about him. He did, in fact, kill a lot of people. So him too, I'm going to have to do an episode on him, the Green River Killer. Wow, can you imagine you'd been in a room with him by yourself? And he really tried it, like, "Hey, let me tie you up and give you a massage." No thank you. All right, the next person said, quote, "When I was 16 years old, I had a run-in with Arthur Shawcross, aka the Genesee River Killer. I did not know who he was at the time because no one knew there was a serial killer on the loose. I was walking down the road on my way to the convenience store and he pulled over to ask me if I needed a ride. I said, "No thank you," and kept walking. He pulled up to me again and opened the door and asked me if I was sure I didn't need a ride. I closed the door and said, "No thank you," once more. Then he pulled up to me again, angrily opened the car door and again ordered me to get into the car. I shouted, "No," and kept walking. He sped off. I got to the store and was walking in as he was walking out and he said, "Bitch." I got the chills from that. I realized who I was actually encountered that day while watching a documentary about him years later, and they showed the car. He had killed 2 women by the time he saw me and was hiding their bodies in a park nearby. Wow. What do y'all think about that one? All right, I think I'm going to do 2 more. This person said, I had a technique that I used when hitchhiking, and it may well have saved me from a nasty end. I was hitchhiking along the Welsh borders one afternoon back in the early 80s. A dirty, battered van pulled up, kind of the thing that farmers drove around in, possibly with a spare sheep in the back. A spare sheep? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be laughing. But who has a spare sheep in the back of their car? All right, sorry. All right, let's start over. A dirty, battered van pulled up, kind of the thing that farmers drove around in, possibly with a spare sheep in the back. The driver leaned over and opened the passenger door and told me to hop in. He was grinning, and it was not a pretty sight. He was an ugly you-know-what. This is where the technique comes in. Whenever someone stopped to pick me up, I did 2 things with 1 piece of preparation beforehand. First thing was, if the door had been opened, or in case it was, to step into a position where I would be on the wrong side of it to be pulled in. The door between me and the driver. I always knew my route really well. I'd studied a map as if I was going to drive it myself, so I was prepared for this. I would ask the driver where he was going, even if he'd asked me first. I'd just answer with the question and make him declare first. That gave me the chance to say, no thanks, I'm going somewhere else, which would involve a fairly major detour to wherever he said. As he leaned across the passenger seat grinning, he kind of looked down, and I saw what was there. 5 or 6 pretty nasty looking porn mags open on the passenger seat. I can't remember where he said he was going, but clearly I wasn't going there. Like basically, this isn't what she said, but basically, even if I was going there, that's not where I'm going. You know what I'm saying? No, I'm not going there. But it looks like you're heading that direction. Yeah, but I'm heading in the opposite direction. Wait, what? What? Anyway, back to what she was saying, or this person. I pretended not to see the mags and just said thanks and started to head off. Fortunately, he pulled away a bit sharpish. It was a quiet place. I'd scarcely seen another car, but at that moment, a brightly painted van sporting a sign for a hippie sort of clown act festival entertainer type of thing came around the corner. I hadn't put my thumb out yet, but the guy immediately pulled over and asked me if I was okay and who was that guy. I don't really know what prompted him to do it. It seemed to be an instinct, but he was plainly trustworthy and asked me if he could take me where I needed to go. He was worried and insistent. He was lovely and took me back to the place I was staying, lecturing me most of the way about hitchhiking on my own. The village was Muchmarkle, a name many Brits will recognize from some of the ugliest news reports we have ever read. The man in the van was, without a doubt, Fred West. All right, I'm going to do a shout out. We have a lovely lamb that listens from Britain. I mean, we have a lot of lovely lambs that listens from Britain, but this one in particular, she sends us messages. She's always really active on our page. So I want to ask the lovely lamb, Stacy Marie, have you ever heard of Fred West? I got to do an episode on him. All right, so I promised 2 more. So this one is the last one. This person says, yes, I have. Michael Bruce Ross, aka the Eggman and the Roadside Killer. As best as I can recollect, the encounter occurred in Rhode Island in early June 1984. At the time, there were news reports about murdered and missing young girls and a possible serial killer in nearby Connecticut along the Rhode Island border. I remember talking about it with my friends and reading about it in the local newspaper, but never gave it a second thought, even when I happened to meet the killer himself. Born and raised in Rhode Island, I moved to Massachusetts that previous year when I was 19. Single and working a full-time job most weekends, I came home to see my friends and do my laundry at my parents' house. On this particular day, it was the end of the weekend and I decided to stop at Beach Pond and do some fishing before heading back to Massachusetts. Beach Pond is in western Rhode Island and straddles Connecticut with the state line bisecting the lake. It's a very rural area on the Rhode Island side with large tracts of protected state forest. It was mid-afternoon when I arrived at the small park, and it was completely desolate as I parked my car in the dirt lot and proceeded to fish just a few feet away. Route 165 was a few hundred feet to the south, and I had a clear view of the few cars driving between the two states. Before long, I watched a small car approach from the Connecticut side, turn left into the parking area, and pull up right next to my car. A young man got out. He looked to be a few years older than me, I was 20 at the time, and proceeded to walk to the edge of the woods about 50 feet behind his car and about 75 feet from me. Curiously and a bit apprehensively, I kept my eye on him as he stood motionless with his hands in his pocket for at least 5, maybe 10 minutes just staring at the ground. Then he walked over to me and immediately started with some small talk, asked about the fishing, introduced himself, shook my hand, and asked me if I could spare a couple dollars for gas. I told him I really couldn't, that I had to drive back to Massachusetts 100 miles away. He told me he didn't think he even had enough gas to make it to a gas station. I asked rhetorically, "You're from Connecticut, right?" "Yes, I am," he replied. "Well, why did you drive to Rhode Island if you don't have enough gas to get back?" "I don't really know. I really like it here." Then I asked, "What were you doing over there in the woods?" "I don't know, just looking around." Standing right next to me on my left, we talked about another 30 minutes or longer. I clearly remember some of the other things we talked about and feeling sorry for him. He and I had both just recently broken up with our girlfriends, and I told him how mine had moved to Florida a few months ago, and that I had just visited her and it was clear we were no longer a couple. He related a similar story about recently going to Florida with his girlfriend and having a big fight and breaking up. I remember him saying he, quote, did something really stupid, end quote, while in Florida, and that his girlfriend's father passed away while they were there. I asked what he did, and he said he'd rather not get into it and that she broke up with him because of it. Then he told me something that really struck me and is one of the reasons I never forget meeting him. I asked him if he likes to fish, and he replied no, that he had never gone fishing before because he had never had time growing up. He told me how he grew up on a farm and worked 7 days a week, how he never really had any friends and never played sports. So I asked him about the farm. "Did you grow corn or something?" And he replied, "No, chickens. It was an egg farm." He proceeded to tell me about working since he was a young child 7 days a week on a farm in Brooklyn, Connecticut. I told him I had never heard of Brooklyn, Connecticut, just the one in New York, but that I'd used to live in Brookline, Massachusetts. He went on to tell me that he went to college but no longer raised chickens and that the farm had been sold. I told him about my job and my trip to Florida. Our conversation went on for some time when suddenly he says, "I have an idea," and quickly walked to his car. Curiously, I watched him go through the trunk of his car, rummaging around like he was looking for something. I asked, "What are you looking for?" "Something I could sell you for gas money," he replied, then walked over to me with a road flare. "Will you give me $2 for this?" "I really can't," I replied, and proceeded to open my wallet and show him all I had was $7. "I need to get gas myself, and I have a long drive home." "That's okay. I understand. Take it anyway. You never know when you're going to break down on the road," he said, handing me the flare. "No, I can't," I told him, but he insisted. So I took the small orange tube and put it in my tackle box, where it remained for many years. Soon I needed to leave, and my new friend walked with me to my car. Packing up, I asked him, "What are you going to do?" And he said, "Oh, I'm not worried. Someone will come by eventually." Pulling out of the dirt lot, I remember looking at him one more time, feeling sorry I couldn't help him as we waved to one another. Over the ensuing years, I would periodically remember this strange chance encounter from time to time, probably due to the road flare that was perennially in my tackle box, but never thought much about it. Then one night, some 20 years later, I was watching a TV documentary about a serial killer on death row in Connecticut. The show included interviews with doctors and detectives and the man himself as he described the killings. Nothing triggered my memory until a picture flashed on the screen showing the killer the day he was arrested, June 29th, 1984. Suddenly, a wave of recognition came over me, and the hair on my head stood up on end. Then a picture of his car flashed on the screen, and my brain became flooded with memories from that day at the beach pond 2 decades earlier. The Connecticut license plate, the large glasses he was wearing, watching him rummage through the trunk of his car. Stammering for words, I tried to tell my wife about how I met this guy many years earlier, but I'm not sure how coherent I sounded. I couldn't believe what was happening and jumped off the couch and ran to the basement. There, in my tackle box, was the road flare he gave me that day so long ago. Dizzy with the realization that I had met and talked to at length with a serial killer years ago was unbelievably stunning. As it turns out, just 2 months earlier, in April 1984, Michael Ross raped and murdered 2 14-year-old girls right there in the dirt parking lot where I met him. I have no doubt the location where they gasped their last breath was where I saw him standing at the edge of the woods. His final victim was murdered in Connecticut on June 13th, 1984. And from the timeline I can construct based on my trip to Florida in May 1984, I believe I met him just days before his last murder. Wow, that is creepy. And there are some others, so I guess I'm going to do a second episode, but this second episode is actually going to be in our Patreon. So if you want to hear more, go ahead and join our Patreon, www.patreon.com/love and murder. So what did y'all think about this episode? It was very, not only interesting, but spine tingling to me, because I can't even imagine being one of those people that, I'm watching a documentary years later and find out that, oh, wait, I met that person and he just killed somebody. And right after I met him, he killed somebody else. Like, was he just talking to me, or was he sizing it up to see if he could kill me? And then you're thinking to yourself that he seemed like such a normal person. Like, you know what I'm saying? You never know. You never know. That's crazy. So like I said, this was just a Patreon bonus episode preview that if you wanted to go ahead and see what we do on over in our Patreon, our lovely lambs are over there. Bonus episodes behind the scenes. We have laughs, we share stories, yada, yada. Head on over to our Patreon, www.patreon.com/love and murder. You can join for just $1. So $1 a month gets you commercial-free episodes, but the best bang for your buck is the $5 and above tiers, where you get bonus true crime episodes. You can get behind the scenes, and the true crime episodes we have are Serial Killer Corner, Crazy Crime, a Crazy Crime medley, about the hosts, just so much stuff we have going on over there. www.patreon.com/love and murder. Also, don't forget to go ahead and subscribe to this show, where you can get more true crime episodes every week for free. So that's for free. Just go ahead and subscribe to our Love and Murder on Apple, on Spotify, on YouTube, on wherever you are. You can get all of our links, our social media, and our website, everything in the show notes below. But that's all I have for you tonight. And as we always end each episode, it's all love and no murder, y'all. See y'all in the Lamb group. Bye.